Krishna, dear devotees, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, where Srila Prabhupada is straightening us out how to live a human form of life. Right now, California is burning to the ground. Europe is flooding like biblical proportions. The variants of the virus is taking hold in so many parts of the world. And here we are hearing Srila Prabhupada's books every day, almost without fail, and keeping us on track that we're actually not of this world. We actually belong to the spiritual world. All the forms around us in this material world are changing, and we're staying the same. And we're hankering to be in a place where we don't have to lose things the way we do here in this material world. So we should offer our deepest gratitude to Srila Prabhupada for coming to the West and saving us with these books. And we should never criticize these books. They're giving us the pathway back to the spiritual world. Right here in the live studios we've got an honored guest, Braj Balaba, visiting us. Got our loyal brahmachari assistant and, jack of all trades. He does everything. Abhay does brahmachari. So first thing we do every day is we recite the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Mahima Stotram from the Sri Krishna Lila Stava by Śrīla Sanatana Goswami. Beautiful 5-verse glorification of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which, by the way, is the summum bonum of everything. Now, Sanatana Goswami is going to tell us all about it. It goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnāja Sarvalokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho Kalidvandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Sadhuta Dayin Atini Chutatakada Hanamun Chagadachin Mam Premna Rit Kantayok Spura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me, always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So Krishna has erected Dwarka, well, fort, but it's also like a huge city, and transferred all of the residents of Mathura over there, and then led Kalyavana to a cave, and not getting his hands dirty, he had Muchukunda burn him to ashes with his vision. And now he's moving on in his pastimes, every one of them incredible. Chapter 52, Krishna, the Raṇacora. When Muchukunda, the celebrated descendant of the Ikshvaku dynasty, was favored by Lord Krishna, he circumambulated the Lord within the cave and then came out. On coming out of the cave, Muchukunda saw that the human species had surprisingly become reduced in stature to pygmy size. Similarly, the trees had also been far reduced in size, and Muchukunda could immediately understand that the current age was Kali Yuga. Therefore, without diverting his attention, he began to travel north. Eventually, he reached the mountain known as Gandhamadana, where there were many trees, such as sandalwood and other flowering trees, whose fragrance made anyone who reached them joyful. He decided to remain in that Gandhamadana mountain region to execute austerities and penances for the rest of his life. It appears that this place is situated in the northernmost part of the Himalaya mountains, where the abode of Narayana is situated. This place is still existing and is called Badarikashram. In Badarikashram, he engaged himself in the worship of Lord Krishna, tolerating all kinds of pains and pleasures and the other dualities of this material world. Lord Krishna returned to the vicinity of the Mathura, where he fought with the soldiers of Kalyavana and killed them one after another. After this, he collected all the booty from the dead bodies, and under his direction, it was loaded on bullock carts and brought back to Dwarka. Meanwhile, Jarasandha again attacked Mathura, this time with bigger divisions of soldiers, numbering 23 Akshahinis. Lord Sri Krishna wanted to save Mathura from the 18th attack of the great military divisions of King Jarasandha, to prevent further killing of soldiers and to attend to other important business. Lord Krishna left the battlefield without fighting. Actually, he was not at all afraid, but he pretended to be an ordinary human being, frightened by the immense quantity of soldiers and resources of Jarasandha. Without any weapons, Krishna left the battlefield. Although his lotus feet were as soft as the petals of a lotus flower, he proceeded for a very long distance on foot. This time, Jarasandha thought that Krishna and Balarama were very much afraid of his military strength and were fleeing the battlefield. He followed them with all his chariots, horses, and infantry. He thought Krishna and Balarama to be ordinary human beings, and he was trying to measure the activities of the Lord. Due to this pastime, Krishna is known as Raṇacora, which means one who has left the battlefield. In India, especially in Gujarat, there are many temples of Krishna known as temples of Raṇacorji. Ordinarily, if a king leaves the battlefield without fighting, he is called a coward. But when Krishna enacts his pastime, leaving the battlefield without fighting, he is worshipped by the devotees. A demon always tries to measure the opulence of Krishna, whereas a devotee never tries to measure his strength and opulence, but always surrenders unto him and worships him. By following in the footsteps of pure devotees, we can know that Krishna, the Raṇacora, left the battlefield not because he was afraid, but because he had some other purpose. The purpose, as it will be revealed, was to attend to a confidential letter sent by Rukmini, his future first wife. Krishna's leaving the battlefield is a display of one of his 6 opulences. Krishna is the supreme powerful, the supreme wealthy, the supreme famous, the supreme wise, and the supreme beautiful. Similarly, he is the supreme renouncer. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam clearly states that he left the battlefield in spite of having ample military strength. Even without his militia, he alone would have been sufficient to defeat the army of Jarasandha, as he had done 17 times before. Therefore, his leaving the battlefield is an example of his supermost opulence, renunciation. After traversing a very long distance, the brothers pretended to become tired. To mitigate their weariness, they climbed up a mountain many miles above sea level. This mountain was called Prabharshana due to constant rain, for the peak was always covered with clouds sent by Indra. Jarasandha took it for granted that the 2 brothers were afraid of his military power and had hidden themselves at the top of the mountain. First, he tried to find them, searching for a long time. But when he failed, he decided to trap and kill them by setting fires all around the peak. He therefore surrounded the peak with firewood and set it ablaze. Not much of a conservationist. As the fire spread more and more, Krishna and Balarama jumped from the top of the mountain down to the ground, a distance of 88 miles. Thus, while the peak was burning up, Krishna and Balarama escaped, unseen by Jarasandha or his men. Jarasandha concluded that the 2 brothers had burned to ashes and that there was no need of further fighting. Thinking himself successful in his efforts, he left the city of Mathura and returned to his home in the kingdom of Magadha. Gradually, Krishna and Balarama reached the city of Dwarka, which was surrounded by the sea. Following this, Sri Balaram married Revati, daughter of King Revata, ruler of Anartha province. This is explained in the 9th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. After the marriage of Baladev, Krishna married Rukmini. Rukmini was the daughter of King Bhishmaka, ruler of the province known as Vidarbha. Just as Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vāsadeva, Rukmini is the Supreme Goddess of Fortune, Maha Lakshmi. According to the authority of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the expansion of Krishna and that of Srimati Radharani are simultaneous. Krishna expands himself into various Vishnu Tattva forms, and Srimati Radharani expands herself into various Shakti Tattva forms by her internal potency as multi-forms of the Goddess of Fortune. According to the Vedic convention, there are 8 kinds of marriage. In the first-class marriage system, the parents of the bride and bridegroom arrange the marriage date. Then, in royal style, the bridegroom goes to the house of the bride, and in the presence of brahmanas, priests, and relatives, the bride is given in charity to the bridegroom. Besides this, there are other symptoms, such as the Gandharva and Rakshasa marriages. Krishna married Rukmini according to the Rakshasa system, kidnapping her in the presence of his many rivals like Shishupal, Jarasandha, and Shalva. While Rukmini was being given in charity to Shishupal, Jarasandha, and Shalva, while Rukmini was being given in charity to Shishupal, Krishna snatched her from the marriage arena exactly as Garuda snatched a pot of nectar from the demigods. Rukmini, the only daughter of King Bhishmaka, was exquisitely beautiful. She was known as Ruchiranana, which means one who has a beautiful face expanded like a lotus flower. Devotees of Krishna are always eager to hear about the transcendental activities of the Lord. His activities of fighting, kidnapping, and running away from the battlefield are all transcendental, being on the absolute platform, and devotees take a transcendental interest in hearing of them. The pure devotee does not make a distinction that some activities of the Lord should be heard and others avoided. There is, however, a class of so-called devotees known as Prakrita Sahajiyas, who were very much interested in hearing about Krishna's Rasalila with the gopis, but not about his fighting with his enemies. They do not know that his bellicose activities and his friendly activities with the gopis are equally transcendental, being on the absolute platform. All the transcendental pastimes of Krishna described in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam are relished by pure devotees through submissive oral reception. They do not reject even a drop. The story of Krishna's marriage with Rukmini is described as follows. The king of Vidarbha, Maharaj Bhishmaka, was very qualified and devoted. He had 5 sons and only 1 daughter. The first son was known as Rukmi, the second Rukmarata, the third Rukmabahu, the fourth Rukmakesh, and the fifth Rukmamali. The brothers had 1 younger sister. The brothers had 1 young sister, Rukmini. She was beautiful and chaste and was meant to be married to Lord Krishna. Many saintly persons and sages like Narada Muni used to visit the palace of King Bhishmaka. Naturally, Rukmini had a chance to talk with them, and in this way she obtained information about Krishna. She was informed about the 6 opulences of Krishna, and simply by hearing about him, she desired to surrender herself to his lotus feet and become his wife. Krishna had also heard of Rukmini. She was the reservoir of all transcendental qualities, intelligence, auspicious physical features, liberal-mindedness, exquisite beauty, and righteous behavior. Krishna therefore decided that she was fit to be his wife. All the relatives of King Bhishmaka decided that Rukmini should be given in marriage to Krishna. But her elder brother, Rukmi, despite the desire of the others, arranged for her marriage with Shishupal, a determined enemy of Krishna. When the black-eyed, beautiful Rukmini heard of the settlement, she immediately became very morose. However, being a king's daughter, she understood political diplomacy and decided that there was no use in simply being morose. Some steps should be taken immediately. After some deliberation, she decided to send a message to Krishna, and so that she might not be deceived, she selected a qualified brahmana as her messenger. Such a qualified Brahmana is always truthful and is a devotee of Vishnu. Without delay, she sent the Brahmana to Dwaraka. Reaching the gate of Dwaraka, the Brahmana informed the doorkeeper of his arrival, and the doorkeeper led him to the palace where Krishna was sitting on a golden throne. Since the Brahmana had the opportunity to be Rukmini's messenger, he was fortunate enough to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original cause of all causes. A Brahmana is the spiritual teacher of all these social divisions. Lord Sri Krishna, in order to teach everyone the Vedic etiquette of how to respect a Brahmana, immediately got up and offered him his throne. When the Brahmana was seated on the golden throne, Lord Sri Krishna began to worship him exactly as the demigods worship Krishna. In this way, he taught everyone that worshipping his devotee is more valuable than worshipping himself. In due time, the Brahmana took his bath, accepted his meal, and lay down to rest on a bedstead completely bedecked with soft silk. As he was resting, Lord Sri Krishna silently approached and with great respect put the Brahmana's legs on his lap and began to massage them. In this way, Krishna appeared before the Brahmana and said, "My dear Brahmana, I hope that you are executing the religious principles without difficulty and that your mind is always peaceful. Different classes of people in the social system are engaged in various professions, and when one inquires as to the well-being of a particular person, he should do so on the basis of that person's occupation. Therefore, when one inquires as to the welfare of a Brahmana, the question should be worded according to his condition of life as not to disturb him. A peaceful mind is the basis for becoming truthful, clean, equipoised, self-controlled, and tolerant. Thus, by attaining knowledge and knowing its practical application in life, one becomes convinced about the absolute truth." The Brahmana knew Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of the Absolute Truth. The Brahmana knew Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and still he accepted the respectful service of the Lord on the grounds of Vedic social convention. Lord Sri Krishna was playing just like a human being. Because he belonged to the Kshatriya division of the social system and was a young boy, it was his duty to show respect to such a Brahmana. Lord Krishna continued, "O best of all the Brahmanas, you should always remain satisfied, for if a Brahmana is always self-satisfied, he will not deviate from his prescribed duties. And simply by sticking to one's prescribed duties, everyone, especially a Brahmana, can attain the highest perfection of all desires. Even if a person is as opulent as the king of heaven, Indra, if he is not satisfied, he inevitably has to transmigrate from one planet to another. Such a person can never be happy under any circumstances, but if one's mind is satisfied, even if he is bereft of all possessions, he can be happy living anywhere." This instruction by Krishna to the Brahmana is very significant. The purport is that a true Brahmana should not be disturbed under any situation. In this modern age, Kali Yuga, the so-called Brahmanas have accepted the abominable position of Shudras or less, and still want to pass as qualified Brahmanas. Actually, a qualified Brahmana always sticks to his Actually, a qualified Brahmana always sticks to his own duties and never accepts those of a Shudra or of one less than a Shudra. It is advised in the authorized scriptures that a Brahmana may, under awkward circumstances, accept the profession of a Kshatriya or even a Vaishya, but never is he to accept the profession of a Shudra. Lord Krishna declared that a Brahmana will never be disturbed by any adverse conditions if he scrupulously sticks to his religious principles. In conclusion, Lord Sri Krishna said, I offer my respectful obeisances to the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, for the Brahmanas are always self-satisfied and the Vaishnavas are always engaged in actual welfare activities for human society. They are the best friends of the people in general. They are free from false egoism and are always in a peaceful condition of mind. Lord Krishna then desired to know about the rulers, Kshatriyas, in the Brahmana's kingdom. So he inquired whether the citizens of the kingdom were all happy. A king's qualification is judged by the temperament of the people in the kingdom. If they are happy in all respects, it is to be understood that the king is honest and is executing his duties rightly. Krishna said that the king in whose kingdom the citizens are happy is very dear to him. Of course, Krishna could understand that the Brahmana had come with a confidential message. Therefore he said, if you have no objection, I give you liberty to speak about your mission. Thus, being very much satisfied by these transcendental pastimes with the Lord, the Brahmana narrated the whole story of his mission in coming to see Krishna. He got out the letter Rukmini had written to Krishna and said, these are the words of Princess Rukmini. My dear Krishna, O infallible and most beautiful one, any human being who happens to hear about your transcendental form and pastimes immediately absorbs through his ears your name, fame, and qualities. Thus, all his material pangs subside, and he fixes your form in his heart. Through such transcendental love for you, he always sees you within himself, and by this process, all his desires are fulfilled. Similarly, I have heard of your transcendental qualities. I may be shameless in expressing myself directly, but you have captivated me and taken my heart. You may doubt my steadiness of character, since how could an unmarried young girl like me approach you without any shame? But my dear Mukunda, you are the supreme lion among human beings, the supreme person among persons. Any girl, though not yet having left her home, or even any woman of the highest chastity, would desire to marry you, being captivated by your unprecedented character, knowledge, opulence, and position. I know that you are the husband of the goddess of fortune, and are very kind toward your devotees. Therefore I have decided to become your eternal maidservant. My dear Lord, I dedicate my life and soul I dedicate my life and soul unto your lotus feet. I have selected your lordship as my husband, and I therefore request you to accept me as your wife. You are the supreme powerful, O lotus-eyed one. Now I belong to you. If that which is enjoyable for the lion to eat is taken away by a jackal, it will be a ludicrous affair. Therefore, I request you to immediately take care of me before I am taken away by Shishupal and other princes like him. My dear Lord, in my previous life, I may have done public welfare work like digging wells and planting trees, or pious activities such as performing ritualistic ceremonies and sacrifices, and serving superiors like the spiritual master, Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. By these activities, perhaps I have pleased the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. If this be so, then I wish that you, Lord Krishna, the brother of Lord Balarama, please come here and catch hold of my hand, so that I shall not be touched by Shishupal and his company. Rukmini's marriage with Shishupal was already settled. Therefore, she suggested that Krishna kidnap her so that this might be changed. This sort of marriage, in which the girl is kidnapped by force, is known as Rakshasa and is practiced among Kshatriyas, or men with an administrative, martial spirit. Because her marriage was already arranged to take place the next day, Rukmini suggested that Krishna come there incognito to kidnap her and then fight with Shishupal and his allies like the king of Magadha. Knowing that no one could conquer Krishna, who would certainly emerge victorious, she addressed him as Ajita, the unconquerable Lord. Rukmini told Krishna not to be concerned about that the fighting would take place within the palace, and that many of her family members, including other women, might thus be wounded or even killed. As the king of a country thinks of diplomatic ways to achieve his object, Rukmini, being the daughter of a king, was diplomatic in suggesting how this unnecessary and undesirable killing could be avoided. She explained that it was the custom of her family to visit the temple of goddess Durga, their family deity, before a marriage. The Kshatriya kings were mostly staunch Vaishnavas, worshipping Lord Vishnu in either the Radha Krishna or Lakshmi Narayana form. Still, for their material welfare, they used to worship goddess Durga. They never made the mistake, however, of accepting the demigods as the Supreme Lord on the level of Vishnu Tattva, as do some less intelligent men. To avoid the unnecessary killing of her relatives, Rukmini suggested that it would be easiest for him to kidnap her while she was either going from the palace to the temple or else returning home. She also explained to Krishna why she was anxious to marry him, even though her marriage was to take place with Shishupal, who was also qualified, being the son of a great king. Rukmini said that she did not think anyone was greater than Krishna, not even Lord Shiva, who was known as Mahadev, the greatest of all demigods. Lord Shiva also seeks the pleasure of Lord Krishna in order to be delivered from his entanglement in the quality of ignorance within the material world. Although Lord Shiva is the greatest of all great souls, Mahatmas, he keeps on his head the purifying water of the Ganges, which emanates from a hole in this material universe made by the toe of Lord Vishnu. Lord Shiva is in charge of the material quality of ignorance, and to keep himself in a transcendental position, he always meditates on Lord Vishnu or Krishna, and always tries to purify himself with the water of the Ganges. Therefore, Rukmini knew very well that obtaining the favor of Krishna was not easy. Since even Lord Shiva must purify himself for this purpose, surely it would be difficult for Rukmini, who was only the daughter of a Kshatriya king. Thus, she desired to dedicate her life to observing severe austerities and penances, such as fasting and going without bodily comforts, if it were not possible in this lifetime to gain Krishna's favor by these activities. She was prepared to die from such austerities and to undergo similar difficulties lifetime after lifetime. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said that pure devotees of the Lord execute devotional service with great determination. Such determination, as exhibited by Rukmini Devi, is the only price for purchasing Krishna's favor. One should be strongly determined in Krishna consciousness, and that is the way to ultimate success. After relaying Rukmini Devi's statement to Krishna, the Brahmana said, "My dear Krishna, chief of the Yadu dynasty, I have brought this confidential message for you from Rukmini. Now it is placed before you for your consideration. After due deliberation, you may act as you please. But if you want to do something, you must do it immediately. There is not much time left for action." Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 50th chapter of Kṛṣṇa, the Raṇacora. Hari Bol, Jai Shri Rukmini Devi, the boldest of the bold. Jai Shri Krishna, the greatest of the great. Hari Bol. That's a famous, famous letter exhibiting the qualities of a liberated soul, more than a liberated soul, eternal consort of Krishna, Vyāsadeva, Krishna. Okay, 7:58. We'll stop the reading tonight here and pray to the devotees to give us their blessings by reflection and discussion of this important points from this chapter. Hare Krishna. Yes, Braj Ballabha he's up first off the blocks. He's right here.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, humble obeisances, glories of Prabhupada.
Glories to Śrīla Prabhupada.
So in tonight's reading, there's two things that stood out, but I'll only ask you about one of them. It says here, a peaceful mind is the basis for becoming truthful, clean, equipoised, self-controlled, and tolerant. Thus, by attaining knowledge and knowing its practical application in life, one becomes convinced about the absolute truth. So the question that comes to my mind is, and this is probably something a lot of people wonder about, is, well, how do I get a peaceful mind?
Well, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna defines austerity. First he defines austerity of the body, then he defines austerity of the words, and then he defines austerity of the mind. So that's what we're talking about here. Person, how do we get a peaceful mind? Mm-hmm. So for the mind to be peaceful in this material world is an austerity in itself, because the mind is always restless and never peaceful in this material world, because the mind was created from the transformation of goodness in the beginning of the creation, the mental energy, and therefore it wants to be in equilibrium. It wants to be peaceful. But in the association of the modes of passion and ignorance, it becomes restless. And when Krishna asked Arjuna to control his mind through the mystic yoga process, Arjuna said, well, I don't think I can do that, because the mind is more difficult To control the mind is more difficult than to control the wind. And Krishna responded, yes, that's true. As a matter of fact, the exact words he used were indicate that it's more difficult than you say. So, later in the Gita, when Prabhupada is explaining, when Krishna is explaining what austerity of the mind is, the first item is satisfaction. So how to get a satisfied mind in this world? It's a mystery. It's very difficult. So Krishna gives us a formula. What are the other, hand me the Gita? The other items of austerity for the mind are, this is in the 17th chapter, by the way, 16th verse. Yeah, turn right to it. How about that? 17, 16. Manak prasadak samyatvam maunam atma binigrahaha bhava sangshudir ityetat tapo manasam uchate. And satisfaction, simplicity, purity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. So, with your permission, I'll read Prabhupada's purport because no one can say it as plainly as this. To make the mind austere is to detach it from sense gratification. It should be so trained that it can be always thinking of doing good for others. The best training for the mind is gravity in thought. One should not deviate from Krishna consciousness and must always avoid sense gratification. To purify one's nature is to become Krishna conscious. Satisfaction of the mind can be obtained only by taking the mind away from thoughts of sense gratification. The more we think of sense enjoyment, the more the mind becomes dissatisfied. In the present age, we unnecessarily engage the mind in so many different ways for sense gratification. And so there is no possibility of the mind's becoming satisfied. The best course is to divert the mind to the Vedic literature, which is full of satisfying stories, like Rukmini, writing a letter to Krishna. As in the Puranas and the Mahabharata, one can take advantage of this knowledge and thus become purified. The mind should be devoid of duplicity. One should think of the welfare of all. Silence means that one is always thinking of self-realization. The person in Krishna consciousness observes perfect silence in this sense. Control of the mind means detaching the mind from sense enjoyment. One should be straightforward in his dealings and thereby purify his existence. All these qualities together constitute austerity in mental activities. So these are the answers to your question about why it's so important for a Brahmana to have a peaceful mind and why it's so difficult to get a peaceful mind. And there's three elements. We'll just summarize them before we go on to other reflections. One is stop thinking about sense gratification. Mm-hmm. Mind has to think about something. So it's not going to think about sense gratification, which is the natural thing for it to think about. It's got to think about something. So therefore, Prabhupada gives the formula. Train the mind to always be thinking of how to do good for others. You feel in trouble, agitated, find somebody who's in trouble and help them. Automatically your mind will become peaceful. And the third thing is to absorb your mind in Shastra, in the scriptures. Especially the Puranas, especially the Mahapurana. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and this Gita Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, especially these books. Hare Krishna.
Thorough answer, thank you.
Okay, we have some more?
First is from Bhakti Noel.
Hare Krishna, Bhakti Noel.
She says, Hare Krishna Maharaj. And from Gopakanya, she says, Jai Maharaj, Hare Krishna. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda and your daily reading.
Hare Krishna.
And your daily reading service of Śrīla Prabhupāda's books, which is giving us indeed the best ways to go home, back to Godhead.
Mm.
And then more from Bhakti Noel.
Mm.
She says, Dear Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. I appreciated hearing at the beginning of our reading, as it reminded me that we mustn't feed into the many gross and subtle situations that come up in the material world.
Yes.
As Krishna left the battlefield, that is our example that we can handle these situations if we follow the regulative principles and keep Krishna in our heart.
Yes.
There will always be temptations for us, but we have the gift of Krishna consciousness to guide us.
Yes.
Walking away doesn't make us weak, but humble to the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yes. Walking away from sense gratification is not escapism, as some psychologists say, but it is actually the goal of life. To go back to the material world is a kind of escapism, but it's real. Who wouldn't want to get out of a prison? Hare Krishna.
She says also, in the instructions to the Brahmanas, this resonated with me. Quote, a peaceful mind is the basis for becoming truthful, clean, equipoised, self-controlled,
yes,
and tolerant.
Yes.
This is one of my goals in this life. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda.
All glories to Prabhupada. Nicely put, Bhakti Noel. Nicely put. Well said.
Something from Bhakta Rupa. His question was the same question as Rajvallabha, so I won't read that, but I'll read what he wrote before. He said, Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for cooling us down on this hot day with your moonbeam voice.
What was his first one? You said you're not going to read it because it's the same as Rajvallabha said?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I can read it again.
Yeah, read it again.
It says, interesting how a peaceful mind is the basis for becoming truthful, clean, equipoised, self-controlled, and tolerant. Wondering if you had any wise words obtaining a peaceful mind.
Yes, we just did that. Okay, next.
From Yadutama.
Haribo Yudutama.
He says, Hare Krishna Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisances and all glories to Prabhupada.
Jai, all glories to Śrīla Prabhupada.
So wonderful to hear these pastimes from you night after night. And thank you for showing us how all we need to be is determined to be Krishna conscious.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Rukmini was determined. And when a person's determined to be with Krishna, Krishna responds because he is the supreme person. The supremely determined person. Hare Krishna.
From Daityari Haridas.
Mm-hmm.
He says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda. I really liked the comparison between the devotees and the demons. The demons try to measure Krishna's opulence, whereas a devotee simply surrenders unto him and worships him. I guess this directly relates to the point Prabhupada explains in the first chapter of the Adi Lila, that if we simply submissively hear about Krishna with faith, then we'll develop deep love for him.
Yes, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami repeats that instruction many times all the way through the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he adds, with faith and love and without argument. As soon as we have an argumentative mind, then our mind becomes disturbed. The mind is not by nature argumentative. When we transcend that argumentativeness, that which comes from the mode of passion and ignorance, then we can actually accept these truths and Krishna's pastimes for what they are. These are historical events. This Bhagavatam is a history of the universe, and especially the most important events of the universe, which have to do to the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in all of his plenary portions. So therefore, the secret is to become absorbed in hearing these pastimes, because they're not different than Krishna. You can associate with Krishna directly by hearing with faith and devotion, without argument, these pastimes. Gita, the Bhagavatam, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we would like to tell you with certainty that the first audiobook, official BBT audiobook of the Chaitanya Charitamrita will come out this year. Will come out this year. I can't promise when exactly, but it's going to come out this year. And I expect that to have a tangible effect, tangible positive effect on Prabhupada's movement and the hearts of all of his sincere devotees. Hare Krishna.
Something more from Gopakanya.
Gopakanya, Haribol.
She says, how important is this hearing from pure devotees of Lord Krishna's pastimes? Amazing.
Yeah, it's most important.
That Rukmini Devi heard from Sri Narada Muni. She determined that she must get only Krishna as her husband and no one else other than him. Jai, blessed by your daily reading service, dear Maharaj. At least I am getting ready for that determination because of hearing from you every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is from Radhesham Das.
Radhesham Das, Hare Krishna.
He says, thank you, dear Keshav Bharti Goswami Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda. Śrīla Prabhupāda was arguing with Dr. Stahl. So where is there a greater opportunity for these words are messed up because they're instead of all the Sanskrit words they're changed over. I can't understand.
You don't have the diacritic, so you can't read the Sanskrit. That's all right. He has a lot of Sanskrit.
It's just a couple of things, but what it is isn't clear. Maybe can't really form the question with it.
So Radhesham is trying to ask a question, but the question is not clear.
Because the diacritics, when they transferred over, became...
Because the diacritics, when they transferred them over, become gobbledygook. So it's hard for him to read. Is there any English in between the Sanskrit, or is it all Sanskrit?
There is. He says, so where is there a greater opportunity, then he quotes, for Vedanta something, Vedanta Shravana, than to hear it from Krishna?
Yes, that's perfectly right. There is no better opportunity than to hear directly from Krishna. But because Krishna worships his devotees, just as we saw him worship the Brahmana, the messenger Brahmana, to show us and put him on his own throne, right? That worship of the devotee is even more important than worship of Krishna. So hearing from the pure devotee is the means by which bhakti becomes awakened in the hearts of others. Of course, this is all happening by Krishna mercy, and because the hearing process is an activity of bhakti, then the conclusion is that bhakti is the source of bhakti is bhakti. And the goal of bhakti is more bhakti. So we get our bhakti revived by hearing from the pure devotees of Krishna or from Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. From Anandamurti Devi Dasi. She says, Jai Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Today I understood that even Lord Krishna worshipped Brahmanas for showing example to us. For us this is very important, to worship qualified Vaishnava as real Brahmanas like you. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so now we have to practically apply it, and if someone's second initiated by Śrīla Prabhupada or by any bona fide spiritual master, then we must give the proper respect to those persons. The application of the knowledge is what gives us wisdom. Wisdom comes from the application of knowledge. Knowledge is good, but jnana vijnana sahitam. Wisdom is better. So we get wisdom by the practical application of the knowledge given in Śrīla Prabhupāda's books, rather than arguing with one another what actually this word means and what that word means and what other person means and this person means, and one Acārya says this and another Acārya says that for the same thing, so what's wrong here? This is the arguing mentality that we were mentioning before that ruins a peaceful mind.
Question from Yadutama.
Yadutama, Haribol.
He says, can you please describe more how this determination is our saving grace?
How this determination is our saving grace? Mm-hmm. Well, it's obvious. You have to be determined to do anything in this world. And Krishna consciousness is the best thing in the world. So therefore you have to be the most determined to do it than anything else. Right? Hare Krishna. You become determined by following the regulated principles of devotional service. This is our standard, our what's the word? Our strength, our spiritual strength comes from following these regulated principles and keeping our vow to our spiritual master, chanting at least 16 rounds every day and trying to chant them without offense, without being distracted, but without having our minds going here and there, without developing thoughts, that are offensive to others, especially Vaishnavas. Krishna. Hare Krishna.
From Bhakti Noel, she says, thank you, Maharaj, for summarizing the 3 main ways to create a peaceful mind. I will work on these principles with determination.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
From Bhakta Rupa.
Haribol Bhakta Rupa.
He says, really like to hear that determination is the only price for purchasing Krishna's favor. Sometimes our ability to serve doesn't measure up to our high determination to serve. From a materially conditioned state, it's easy to be result-orientated and can become frustrated.
Well, determination that he's talking about is not that kind of determination. That you become strongly determined to do something, to get something for yourself, or to accomplish something. This determination is the determination to achieve Krishna's mercy, to achieve Krishna's favor. And in that path, the actual currency for purchasing this is a tear. If when you hear the holy name and you hear Krishna's pastimes, tears come to your eyes, then you have become determined. Determined doesn't mean some kind of dependence on physical strength or mental strength or mental intellectual strength. Determination means to actually, determination of this kind of determination means to follow the instructions that have been given us by Krishna. So the heart has to melt in contact with Krishna. When the heart melts in contact with Krishna, that means one is focused, one is determined to be with Krishna, determined to become Krishna's pure-hearted servant. Hare Krishna. And that other determination you're talking about, with strength and with grit and all those things, that is meant to be used, dovetailed in the distributing Krishna consciousness. Because to go out and in the public and meet people you've never known before, and be bold enough, determined enough to present Krishna conscious books to them, and resourceful enough and expert enough in your speech to convince the person to give a donation for it. This is, that takes determination, purity, straightforwardness, simplicity. Hare Krishna.
Bhakti Rupa says, straw in mouth, Maharaj, I know nothing.
Strong in mouth, I know nothing.
Straw.
Oh, straw in mouth. Hare Krishna. Yeah, it's the first step. Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami put straw in their mouth, didn't he? I thank all of you for these wonderful comments and reflections, and for actually stimulating. I mean, I can't remember anything, to tell you the truth. 75 years old. Sometimes I can't remember what I was going to the other side of the room to do. What I was going to do. It's part of old age. But your reflections and questions and discussions somehow or other stir my memory and get me to say things that I've heard that I didn't remember that I remembered. Hare Krishna. Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. See you tomorrow night as Krishna goes through his adventures, and we follow along and listen with enthusiasm. Hare Krishna. See you tomorrow night. Hari Bo.